All right. Good morning, everybody. We're live here from the birdhouse. We are back live after battling a little bit of a sickness. I'm back here live. So I've got a little update for you guys on some of the different birds that are being seen in the area. There is still time to see some of these winter visitors. So I thought I'd focus on them because it's starting to feel a little bit like spring, and you might see some of the bird activity in your yard changing, and I might start to hear those birds singing because they are starting to uh, to get ready for mating season and breeding season. As the days get longer, the sun is stronger, and I've been hearing birds singing in the backyard, which is a really good sign. So as always, if you've got questions, you can throw those in the comments. You can just say hi. We love to know what kind of things you guys are seeing as you're out birding or in your backyard. I've got some photos to share too. I was able to do a little birding last Sunday, which was really fun, and went out to look for some ducks along Lake Ontario and the Irondequoit Bay, and was rewarded with several different species of ducks, like the long-tailed duck. This is one of our winter visitors that comes down south here for the winter months and will ultimately go up north into the Arctic for their breeding season, but they are still around in some big numbers. In this picture here of the long-tailed duck in flight, you can see how it gets its name. That's the male with a nice long plumage there for its tail. These are diving ducks, so you can often see them kind of hanging around on the water, and then all of a sudden they'll dive underneath the water, which is really, really fun to see. So got to see some long-tailed duck. There were some common merganser out there along the shore. This is a common merganser female, and then here was a nice little strip of male common mergansers that were flying in sync. Also, this picture I believe was around Irondequoit Bay. There was a whole bunch of them on Irondequoit Bay, and even got to see some common goldeneye. And here's a zoomed in picture of the goldeneye there. So there were lots of duck activity out there. There were lots of redheads out there. I saw a canvasback, and I'll share with you some other photos that have been sent in over time of some different birds that you can see still along the lake. But we are starting to get closer and closer and closer to breeding season. So you might start to see some activity in your backyard that would dictate that. Birds are going to be starting to pair up. You might start to see them with some nesting material. One of our first nesting birds is going to be the eastern bluebird. They're one of our earliest nesting songbirds, and they're cavity nesters, so you might start to see them check out different bird houses that you have if you are lucky enough to get bluebirds in your yard. So if you haven't already, you want to make sure that you do clean out your bird houses, that you've cleaned them out of any debris, that you can spray them down with white vinegar. We have enzymes here that you can use to clean the houses. So you want to make sure your houses are nice and clean for nesting season, because it'll be here before we know it. So bluebirds, you might start to see pair up a little bit, and you might just start see other birds like house finches, house sparrows, like this bird here, grabbing nesting material. So we do have the nesting balls, we have nesting material here, and you can put those out, and you'll start to see shortly, within the next couple weeks, I would say, especially with the house sparrows, you might start to see them grabbing some of this nesting material and also starting to nest. They will nest early, and they'll nest throughout the whole season until it gets cold out. So we'll start to see some of that happening soon in backyards, which is really exciting. We'll have some classes coming up too about nesting birds and how to attract birds using bird houses and nesting material. So be on the lookout for those too. We'll have those on our event list. European starlings. Lots of people are reporting starlings at their feeder. Right now they're in their non-breeding plumage, so they look like this. They're very speckly with those white spots all over them and that dark bill. As we get into breeding season, they're going to get a little more colorful. They'll be more iridescent colored, and that bill will turn bright yellow. So European starlings are out there, and you might even start to get some of our early migrating birds in the backyard, things like red-winged blackbird, brown-headed cowbird, even grackles. They start to flow in usually around March. They don't go really, really far south like some of our migrants do, like orioles and hummingbirds do. So these blackbirds don't have as far of a distance to travel. So they start coming back to backyards pretty early on in the spring. Now, the European starling is here all winter long. They don't migrate, they just stick around. So if you're seeing them, that's pretty common right now. But don't be surprised if you start to see things like red-winged blackbird. You might hear their little rattly calls. They will form mixed flocks with other blackbirds like the brown-headed cowbird and the grackle. If they do start to really invade your feeders, and if they're eating you out of house and home, you can always switch to the safflower seed. A lot of people will do that during the spring months. The blackbirds don't like the safflower seed, and neither do the European starlings. And the European starlings kind of get grouped into that blackbird group a lot of the times, even though they're not at all related. But they don't like the safflower either. So that's a good way to still feed birds. Like cardinals love the safflower, chickadees love the safflower, finches love it, but the blackbirds don't. So you can still feed lots of birds, but keep those blackbirds at bay by offering the safflower seed. And you can offer it loose seed like this that you just pour into your feeders. There's also the safflower logs, which are really popular. The birds have to peck away at these logs, so it can take them a little bit more time to go through these than it would just pouring seed into your feeders. So those are some things that you can do to keep your feeders full, but kind of keep those blackbirds at bay if you want to. Some other common winter backyard birds to be on the lookout for while we are still in these winter months are things like pine siskin coming to your finch feeder, coming to your sunflower seed feeder. They look like goldfinches. Sometimes they'll form mixed flocks with goldfinches, but the pine siskin are going to have more stripes on them. They have that sharp bill, and they don't have a wing that's as dark as the American goldfinch does, but you can see there's some highlights of yellow on that pine siskin wing. So they're definitely around. Goldfinches are definitely here coming to feeders. They're not bright gold yet. This was a photo from a couple of years ago sent in by Karen, who had some goldfinches flocking to her feeder. So this is what they look like right now. They're still that kind of olive brownish color. But as we get on in the weeks ahead, they'll start to molt those feathers and turn that bright gold, which we always love to see. Some other birds to be on the lookout for that are still here during the winter but are going to be flying further north are things like the American tree sparrow. You can find them at feeders. You can find them in parks. They're around right now. Of course, our dark-eyed junco, which is our winter visitor, and pretty sparse in the spring and summer months, depending on where you live. But right now, they're very common in backyards and at feeders. And then, of course, the red-breasted nuthatch. Red-breasted nuthatch are seasonally more abundant in the wintertime. You might find white-breasted nuthatch at your feeders all year round. And there are some red-breasted nuthatch around here year-round too, but they are more common in the winter months, and this has been a good year for red-breasted nuthatch. And here's the white-breasted nuthatch. So both of these are around right now. And then there's the birds of prey that you can look for, things like short-eared owl that are patrolling the open fields in the winter months looking for a meal. And songbirds like snow bunting also love wide open fields. You can look for them in flocks. Sometimes you'll see a nice big flock of dozens or even hundreds of snow buntings. And sometimes mixed in, there's other birds too, like horned lark are another bird that like those wide open fields that you can be on the lookout for. And lots of waterfowl out there, things like tundra swan, of course, mute swan, which are an introduced bird, but they're quite common around here with that bright orange bill, really, really beautiful bird. But then there's also the tundra swan. And gulls. Now's a good time to look for gulls as well. Some of our common gulls, like ring-billed gull, you can find just about by any kind of open water, and herring gull, which are a little larger, and they don't have that line that goes through their bill like the ring-billed gull does. So this is the ring-billed gull with that stripe through its bill. And then there's herring gull. And a really neat gull you can find right now is the great black-backed gull. It's quite large and it has a very, very dark back. So they're out there. They're out to be found right now as well. I mentioned long-tailed duck is a really fun bird to look for right now while we're in the winter months still. And then here is a group of gulls. These are some photos sent in by Mark a couple years ago around this time, showing some of the diversity of different birds you can find by the water. And here you can see that great black-backed gull mixed in with a whole bunch of other gulls. So you can see the size difference and you can see how the coloration is quite a bit different. There's a lot of ring-billed gulls in this photo. Looks like there's some herring gulls in there too. And then right in the middle, there's that great black-backed gull, quite a bit larger. And when they're in flight, you can see that those wings on the back of their wings are quite dark. So they do look a lot different than the other gulls out there right now. Also, if you are going out birding, there's a lot of eagles out there, especially on Irondequoit Bay. These pictures are a couple years old, but last Sunday when I went out there, there were certainly lots and lots of eagles flying around on the bay, sitting on the ice floats. So lots of eagles out there. They don't all necessarily have that bright white head and white tail. Those are the adults that are a few years old. Will have that coloration, but the juveniles are going to be more mottled and brown. So you can find lots of eagles out there on Irondequoit Bay. If you're looking for eagles, that is the place that I would recommend locally to go to. And so much waterfowl out there. I showed a few pictures at the beginning of the broadcast of some of the waterfowl that I saw last weekend while out birding, but there's also things like white-winged scoter out there. This is a picture of one of those. Mark sent this photo in saying white-winged scoter catching some lunch. And then here's a white-winged scoter mixed in with some long-tailed ducks. So some good winter waterfowl right there. Another long-tailed duck photo. You can see that beautiful long tail, that long plumage. And scaup is another type of waterfowl out there. There's greater scaup. There's also what's called lesser scaup, which looks very similar but has a thinner head. Both can be found out there on the water right now. So even though we are in winter, there's still lots of bird activity out there, and you'll start to see the birds kind of changing their ways. They're going to as far as some of the birds that we're grouping together, like cardinals, they're going to start dissipating a little bit and pairing up, and you'll start to see some signs of spring in your backyard. If you're not seeing or hearing them already, you will start to soon, which is a really exciting time of the year. We're definitely getting ready for it here at the birdhouse, and we're getting in all kinds of birdhouses and spring merchandise. We're getting ready for orioles and hummingbirds, mason bees. So we're getting all ready for the spring ahead, which is really exciting. So that is everything I have for you guys today. We will be back live on Tuesday with another broadcast. And until then, have a great weekend, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.